The moment I welcomed Pablo into my space, I was fully aware of my intentions. I was completely sober. I was not ensnared by a fleeting lapse in strength. No, this wasn't merely a transient error, something I could attribute to happenstance. I desired it. I desired him. For quite some time, I had. It began in a seemingly harmless way, with fleeting looks exchanged during work and light-hearted chats that lingered just a bit longer than intended. A gentle brush against my arm accompanied his laughter at my words. His deep, smooth voice sent delightful shivers across my skin. He was in his mid-30s, younger than I, exuding a natural confidence, his physique a testament to dedication and power. He glided forward with the confidence of someone fully aware of his own strengths. And I sensed it deeply. Each time he strolled by, each moment his gaze held mine for a heartbeat too long, I sensed that gradual, perilous warmth winding itself deep within me. I was aware that I ought to disregard it. I once shared my life with a husband, our marriage rooted in comfort and routine, a stable and predictable existence. Yet, what was once predictable began to feel hollow. And, Pablo, he was far from hollow. That afternoon, as my husband departed for his business trip, I acted without a moment's hesitation. I glanced over at Pablo, allowing my gaze to meet his, conveying the unspoken invitation within my eyes. As I softly beckoned him to come closer, the smirk on his face revealed that he had been anticipating this moment just as eagerly as I had. As we crossed the threshold, the atmosphere in the house shifted, electric with anticipation. The door clicked shut behind us, enclosing us in a space removed from the outside, distanced from guilt, distanced from logic. Pablo stood nearby, his presence captivating in the most delightful manner. His aroma, rich and inviting, enveloped me, causing my breath to catch. He remained still for a moment, taking his time. Instead, he allowed the tension to escalate, permitting the distance between us to diminish gradually. His dark eyes lingered on me, methodical and intent, absorbing every nuance. "You seem a bit on edge," he whispered. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest. "I'm not," his smirk grew more pronounced, deceiver. His fingers grazed my arm, a mere whisper of touch, yet it sent a shiver coursing through me, my skin yearning for more. I had never desired anything with such intensity. And he was aware of it. "Pablo," I breathed his name, a mere whisper, yet it carried weight. Just enough for him to advance, his hands at last clasping my waist, strong and commanding. Just enough for his lips to graze my ear, his breath warm against my skin. "Are you certain about this?" I wasn't merely uncertain, I was filled with a sense of urgency. In that moment, I responded as best as I could, bridging the final gap between us, my lips meeting his, surrendering myself entirely to him. And the moment I did, he seized me. Without a moment's pause, without a flicker of doubt, only sheer, unwavering desire. His hands gripped my hips, drawing me closer, his form firm and resolute. His kiss was fierce, insistent, taking away my breath, my thoughts, my very essence. I inhaled sharply against his lips, my fingers weaving through his hair, craving him nearer, deeper, more. He let out a low, deep groan, his grip tightening as his control began to wane, allowing me to sense the shift. The raw power he exuded, the authority in his movements, the way he commanded every moment of this experience. It was mesmerizing, irresistible, and it was precisely what I had longed for. Pablo hoisted me with ease, his hands firmly clasping my thighs, transporting me through the house as if I were weightless. My back collided with the wall, his form enveloping me, and I inhaled sharply, my fingers clawing into his shoulders. I had never experienced such a profound sense of insignificance, so utterly, delightfully unrestrained. And I wished for it to continue, wished to avoid thoughts, wished to exist without the need for breath in his absence. "Pablo," I whispered his name, hardly aware of my own voice. He leaned back just a bit, his forehead touching mine, his breath warm and deep. "I've been anticipating this," he whispered, his tone gritty, teetering on the edge of peril. I trembled, my fingers clutching him more firmly. "So, please, no more delays." His dark eyes pierced through me, a raw intensity igniting within them. He lifted me up the stairs, each step measured and intentional, the tension between us winding tighter and tighter until I felt as though I might burst. Uncertainty loomed ahead, yet there was an undeniable momentum propelling me forward. The line had been crossed, and retreat was no longer an option. I was committed to this path, and there was no desire to turn back. Pablo lifted me up the stairs with a grace and power that left me momentarily breathless. His hold was strong and commanding, his hands digging into my thighs, as if to ensure I remained right where he wanted me. However, that possibility was utterly out of reach. I found myself rooted in place. My arms encircled his strong shoulders, my fingers weaving through the gentle curls at the back of his neck. His aroma, deep, inviting, and alluring, enveloped me, causing a delightful dizziness. With each stride he made, every ripple of his strength, a rush of excitement coursed through me. I had never experienced such treatment before, as if I were both delicate and formidable simultaneously, as if I belonged to him already. As we entered the bedroom, I barely had a moment to catch my breath before he gently laid me down on the bed, his body coming to rest beside me, enveloping me in warmth while the soft sheets embraced my back. His presence was powerful, enveloping in the most delightful manner. His hands glided gently along my sides, purposeful and assured, allowing me to savor each instant of his touch. His gaze locked onto mine, deep and inscrutable, brimming with an undeniable intensity. "You've pondered this previously, haven't you?" he inquired, his tone soft yet laced with a hint of mischief in his smile. I nodded, my breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. Indeed, a gradual smile emerged on his lips. "What is the duration?" I paused for a brief instant, then murmured, "Since the very first time you laid your hands on me." His fingers glided softly along my arm, delicate as a whisper, yet it ignited a surge of electricity within me. "The office," he remarked, "that moment I hurried by you. It resonated with you." A gasp lodged in my throat. "Absolutely." He leaned in a bit, his voice now more gentle yet resolute. "I was aware of it." His hands moved down with intention, settling on my waist. "You attempted to conceal it," he remarked, his breath gently brushing against my cheek. Yet, I sensed it. My hands clutched his shoulders, my fingers digging into him. "Pablo, speak it," he murmured, just above a whisper, yet his tone carried a significant weight. His lips grazed the contour of my jaw, and the feeling ignited a wave of electricity throughout my whole being. "I desired you," I confessed, my voice trembling. His grip firmed at my sides. "Continue to do so." "Indeed." As soon as the words left my lips, a change occurred. The strain between us lingered, taut and fragile for an eternity. At last, it has shattered. He leaned in, our lips connecting in a passionate, fervent kiss. His hands gripped me tightly, conveying the weight of the moment, the inevitability that had been building for so long. The kiss was electric, rendering me utterly breathless. My fingers tangled in his hair, drawing him nearer. He let out a soft sound from deep within, his fingers weaving through my hair, grounding me as the moment enveloped us both. This lacked gentleness. It was bold. It began as a flicker, igniting into a blazing fire. His hands descended, securing me as he drew me nearer. Every fiber of my being responded to him. And I sensed it in every place he made contact. This subtle strength, this force he possessed. I embraced it wholeheartedly. In the way he embraced me, in the rhythm of his movements, I found a refuge from all that surrounded us. In the presence of Pablo, the world faded away. For the first time in ages, I felt no urge to restrain myself. "Whisper to me that I belong to you," he breathed against my lips, his tone raw with desire. I acted without a moment's pause. "I belong to you." A low, resonant growl emanated from deep within his chest. In that instant, I realized I had surrendered it all to him. I never looked back, not even for a moment. The outside world had vanished completely. The night stretched on, a blur that transformed into an endless expanse, searing with intensity. I became utterly absorbed in him, in his power, in his dominance. As I finally leaned against him, breathless and exhausted, my skin still alive with the sensation of his touch, I realized I had nothing more to offer. Still, I craved something deeper. I desired him. Pablo's arm wrapped firmly around my waist, drawing me nearer, his breath a gentle warmth against my temple. "You're not going anywhere," he whispered. It was not a question. I trembled, my fingertips gliding in gentle arcs across his skin. "I prefer not to." His smirk radiated a sense of triumph. "Excellent, as we still have more to accomplish." The room remained enveloped in the warm embrace of the evening light, creating elongated shadows that danced over the sheets entwined around us. The sensation of Pablo's touch lingered on my skin, my breath coming in uneven gasps as I reclined beside him, my head nestled against his chest. His fingers glided in gentle circles across my bare back, his hold both strong and reassuring, as if he still wasn't ready to release me. I had no desire to attend. This moment felt distinct, imbued with a rawness, a sense of authenticity. It wasn't merely the surge of excitement or the allure of hidden moments, it was the intensity of his gaze, the warmth of his presence, and the profound sense of vitality that coursed through me, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. Pablo inclined his head just a bit, gazing down at me, his deep-set eyes smoldering with an enigmatic intensity. "You're rather subdued." I breathed out gently, letting my fingers glide over the firm contours of his chest, momentarily pausing to gather my breath. A deliberate, understanding smile played at the corners of his mouth. "I appreciate you in this way." "What do you mean?" His fingers wove through my hair, lifting my chin to align our gazes, raw and unguarded, mine. A chill coursed through my body. I ought to have set him straight, to have pointed out that I was tied to another, that this was merely a fleeting moment, a diversion, a perilous temptation. In that instant, the reality was undeniable. I belonged to him entirely, and we were both acutely aware of it. Pablo drew closer, his lips barely brushing the edge of my mouth, his breath a gentle warmth on my skin. "Linger a bit more." I paused, my fingers gripping his chest more firmly. "I ought not to." "Yet, the desire is there." "Indeed." "Absolutely, without a doubt." The phone rested on the nightstand, shrouded in darkness and silence for the moment, yet I was acutely aware that as soon as I reached for it, the weight of reality would come rushing in. My partner, my existence, the persona I meticulously crafted throughout the years. Yet Pablo's touch lingered, remaining with me, possessing me entirely. I found myself unprepared to release it. "Just one more hour," I murmured softly. His smirk grew more pronounced. "That's everything I require." And just like that, I found myself captivated by him once more. When I next opened my eyes, the room was enveloped in a soft, dim light, while the sky outside transitioned from a warm gold to a rich, deep blue. I blinked, stretching gently, my muscles pleasantly sore, my body still resonating from all that we had experienced. Pablo lay on one elbow, observing me with that familiar inscrutable look, his fingers moving in slow, intentional designs along my hip. I bit my lip, feeling a rush of self-awareness as his eyes lingered on me. "Excuse me?" His smirk unfolded gradually, with a languid ease. "There's something captivating about seeing you awaken beside me." A simmering warmth curled within me. "This is not your bed." "It is happening now." His words, delivered with such confidence and ease, sent a shiver down my spine. I lifted my head, propping myself up on my elbows. "I ought to take my leave now." Pablo seized my wrist just as I was about to escape, his hold steady and anchoring. "You're not prepared at this moment," he wasn't inquiring. What's even more frustrating? He was correct. I found myself unprepared to re-enter my existence, to don the facade of the devoted spouse, to act as if today had not occurred, for it had indeed taken place, and I had never experienced such a profound sense of vitality. I exhaled softly, my fingertips gliding over his jawline. "You bring chaos." His grin broadened. "And you cherish it." I couldn't refute it, for we were both aware of the reality. As I stepped out, the sky had turned an inky black, the streets lay in silence, and the world continued on, oblivious to any shift that had occurred. Yet, all had transformed. I navigated the road in quiet contemplation, my hands clenched around the steering wheel, my heart racing from the weight of my actions. The phone vibrated softly in the passenger seat. Notifications, unanswered calls, a signal of the existence I was heading back to. As I drove into the driveway and entered the dark, quiet house, a realization washed over me. I felt no remorse. I felt no shame. A sense of liberation washed over me. What's the most perilous aspect? I sensed that this was far from the end. Nowhere near it. Upon entering, the house enveloped me in darkness, the atmosphere remaining eerily silent. For a moment, I stood frozen, my breath shallow, my body still vibrating with the echoes of everything that had transpired. The aroma of Pablo remained on my skin, his caress still resonated in the spots he had uniquely marked. I could have hurried upstairs, could have cleansed myself, wiped away every reminder of him before my husband came back, but I didn't. Instead, I advanced with a measured pace, purposefully removing my heels, letting my fingers glide along the smooth, cool surface of the kitchen counter. I enjoyed the sensation I experienced at this moment. Unfettered, easygoing, content. I had nearly lost touch with that sensation. The buzz of my phone jolted me back to the present moment. I extended my hand, a knot forming in my stomach, as my husband's name lit up the screen. I paused, the phone pressed against my ear as I contemplated my response. Greetings. Hello, darling. Daniel's voice carried a warmth and ease, oblivious to the darkness intertwined within me. I have just arrived. I thought it would be best to reach out before making my way home. I took a deep breath, striving to keep my voice calm. How did your journey go? He let out a hearty laugh. Your absence has been felt deeply. A flicker of something contorted in my chest. Regret? No, something different. An indescribable something. I missed you as well, I replied effortlessly, resting against the counter. Daniel let out a deep breath. You seem weary. Are you all right? A smile crept across my face. Feeling weary? No, wasted, destroyed. I'm all right, I whispered, brushing my hair back behind my ear. It has been quite an exhausting day. I'm really looking forward to seeing you, he expressed. I expect to be back home in about an hour. I breathed out gently, allowing the gravity of his words to envelop me. 60 minutes. 60 minutes remained before I had to don my persona once more. Before I had to eliminate every sign of Pablo. Before, I had to act as if tonight was just a figment of my imagination. I will be waiting, I whispered. And then I ended the call. However, I found myself unwilling to release this just yet. I rested my weight against the counter. My head tilts back slightly. My body remains alive with energy. Continuing to reflect. I shut my eyes, my fingers wandering aimlessly across my skin, mapping the spots where Pablo had lingered only hours before. And then, yet another buzz. A unique title. Pablo. My heart raced. I paused, gazing at the screen, my heartbeat quickening in response. In that moment, I took my time before responding. His voice flowed effortlessly, rich and resonant, tinged with a sense of fulfillment. You've arrived home. I exhaled softly, a faint smile playing on my lips. Absolutely. Have you taken a shower yet? A knot formed in my stomach. Negative. A soft, amused laugh. Excellent. I trembled, clutching the countertop tightly. Pablo, you have me on your mind, he whispered. Are you not? I took a deep breath. Indeed. Exceeding the appropriate amount. Exceeding what was prudent. However, I did not express that. Instead, I bit my lip, my voice scarcely rising above a whisper. Perhaps. His breath caught for a moment, and I could sense the playful smirk in his tone. Please be honest with me, Karina. I released a breath, my body revealing its secrets, my thighs instinctively drawing together. He hummed in satisfaction, declaring his contentment. I had the same impression. The stillness lingered in the air, heavy with unspoken words, charged with an unsettling energy. At last, he uttered another word, his tone more subdued, more mysterious. "You'll encounter me once more." It was not a question. What's even more frustrating? I had the desire to. I had to. I shut my eyes, gripping the counter tightly, my body remaining his, even in this moment, even in this place. I understood, I murmured, for this was far from finished. This was merely the outset. I ought to have concluded it at that moment. I ought to have said no, ought to have erased his number, ought to have taken action to prevent this before it spiraled into something beyond my control. Yet, I remained rooted in place, my phone clutched to my ear, breath coming in fits, my body aflame with the weight of his actions. I realized I ought to have moved on, yet I held on tight. Instead, I murmured, "When?" A moment of silence lingered, then a deep, contented laugh emerged. "Whenever you feel prepared, my love." He was a force to be reckoned with. I found myself lacking strength. I released a shaky breath, my fingers tightening around the counter. "Daniel will be returning home shortly." "I understand," Pablo remarked, his tone fluid and assured. "Isn't that the reason you find it impossible to get me out of your mind?" I took a deep breath, my heart racing fiercely. He was indeed correct. I could already hear my husband's key in the door, envision the way he'd smile at me, press a kiss to my cheek, tell me he missed me, and I would smile back, play my role, let him hold me, even as my body still ached for someone else. It ought to have stirred a sense of guilt within me, yet it failed to do so. It filled me with a sense of vitality. Pablo's voice fell to a hushed whisper, sending a chill coursing through me. "You belong to me now, Karina. You're aware of that, aren't you?" My throat felt parched. I ought to have refused him, should have acknowledged that this was an error. Yet, I softly replied, "Yes." His breath caught momentarily. "Well done." A chill ran down my spine. The unmistakable sound of tires crunching over gravel echoed from outside. Daniel had returned to his abode. I straightened abruptly, placing a hand on my chest, attempting to calm my breath, striving to suppress the wave of adrenaline that continued to course through my veins. Pablo surely caught wind of it as well. His voice took on a self-satisfied, ominous tone. "Go embrace your husband, Karina, but remember who truly holds your heart now." And then he hung up, leaving me there, my skin aflame, my heart pounding, my body still betraying me with the intensity of my desire for him. As soon as Daniel stepped inside, a smile spread across his face. "Hello, lovely." I took a deep breath, adjusted my dress, and put on the smile I had honed through the years. "Hello." He placed his bag aside and approached me, his arms encircling my waist as he gently pressed a tender kiss to my forehead. "I've been thinking about you." I breathed out, sinking into his hold, allowing myself to imagine, if only for a moment, that everything remained the same. That I remained his. That I hadn't already committed to another. Yet, as soon as his lips grazed mine, I sensed it. The distinction. The absence of immediacy. The way his hands lingered softly on my hips rather than asserting ownership over me. The way he kissed me, infused with a sense of familiarity rather than pure desire, struck me like a sudden surge of electricity. I was no longer the woman he had kissed farewell just 2 days prior. I had experienced something different, and now I craved more. I withdrew first, giving him another smile as I extended my hand toward his bag. "It seems you might be feeling a bit weary," he confessed, stretching slightly. "However, I would prefer to simply enjoy the evening in your company." I nodded, taking a step back, compelling myself to act as if everything was fine. To pretend that all was well. "I shall pour you a drink." I spun around swiftly, ensuring he wouldn't scrutinize me too intently. Before he could glimpse the reality reflected in my gaze. As he spoke of his flight, his meetings, and all the things he deemed significant, my mind remained fixated on Pablo. Continuing to sense his presence. Still tied to him. What's even more frustrating? Ceasing was not my desire. That evening, I found myself in bed next to my husband, attuned to the rhythm of his slow, steady breathing, my gaze fixed on the ceiling as time slipped away. I ought to have felt exhausted. It ought to have been utterly drained. Yet my body remained fully alert. Still unsettled. Still craving more. I rolled onto my side, gazing at Daniel's peaceful face, at the man who had bestowed upon me everything. Consistency. Protection. Cozy warmth. Ultimately, it fell short. With careful steps, I eased myself out of bed, making my way down the hallway toward the bathroom. The image in the mirror gazed back at me. Crimson-hued cheeks. Lips that are a bit swollen. Eyes remained shadowed by an unnamed emotion. I activated the faucet, letting the cool water cascade over my face, attempting to soothe the heat that lingered beneath my skin. Then I extended my hand towards my phone. The message had already been conveyed. Pablo. Once more, I'm on your mind. I took a deep breath, my fingers tightening around the edge of the sink. I ought to have overlooked it. I ought to have silenced my phone, nestled back into bed, pressed my body against my husband's, and allowed myself to drift away from reality. However, I did not. In response, I composed a reply. Myself. Absolutely. A moment of stillness. Next, Pablo. Excellent. Because I desire you once more. My breath was taken away. I gazed at the screen, those 5 words causing my body to tense and my world to shift. As I was aware. I was certain this wouldn't be the final encounter. No matter how much effort I put in, no matter how often I reminded myself that this was a mistake, I found myself returning to him time and again. I would long for him. And when the moment arrived, when Pablo summoned me once more, I would respond, unflinchingly, without remorse. For I belonged to him now. And there was no turning back.